All right, guys, what is up? Welcome in another episode of GC Live. Going to be joined here very shortly by one of our special guests, one of our favorite guests, I should say, our guy Charles Power, On3/Rivals, Director of Scouting and Recruiting. But first, let me tell you about our guy Clint Hammond, CMG Home Loans, ClintHammond.com, 803-422-6797, NMLS number 71597. Chris, like we always tell people, hey, if you're in the market for a home, or if you're thinking about maybe, refinancing, trying to take out some equity with that HELOC, whatever other options might be just of curiosity to you, hit up our guy Clint. He's going to walk you through all the details of that. And if you're renting right now and home ownership is something that, may be in your future or you want to be in your future, and you're just wanting to know all the ins and outs of what, frankly, A, can be a complicated just process, and B is going to be, frankly, one of the biggest purchases most people will ever make. Clint will take care of you every single step of the way with that.
We'll also tell everybody about our friends, at Ferry Chevrolet. That's ferrychevrolet.com, F-A-I-R-E-Y, Chevrolet, ferrychevrolet.com, 803-937-4531. Same deal as Clint, not for mortgages, for vehicles. Looking for a new or used vehicle from a locally owned company, fourth-generation dealer who still runs the show over there, Joseph Ferry. They've been around since 1926, guys, so you know what they're doing. Check them out, ferrychevrolet.com, for new and used vehicle inventory, financing options, all that good stuff. Give them a chance to earn your business.
All right, without further ado, let's bring in our guy, Charles Power. Charles, as always, man, great to see you. Great to have you on the show. Always one of our favorite guests, and we appreciate you taking the time. How you been doing, man?
I've been doing good. We are deep in 2027 rankings right now, so kind of making that transition from 26 to 27. But just heavy rankings season for us. I think my months of January and February are some of my busiest, or some of our busiest, just from catching up on all these players and getting the final rankings out.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you taking some time during all that. And I always think it's fascinating when the higher ups officially switch it over. Like if you hit commit list, is it going to say 2026 or is it say 2027? It's already saying 2027. I feel like that moment has become like earlier and earlier in the process over the years. Yep. So here we are, but today we're going to talk some 2026. And man, I think we got to start with Julian Walker. And before you dive into Julian, like specifically, I think this is something people always say on social media or something it's worth diving into a little bit. This just thought or idea of like, well, hey, how are these rankings changing when they haven't played any more high school football games? And, I think you can dive into it certainly more than I could, but can you maybe just go into like that entire process, the fact that I imagine you're still going back and going through tape from the high school season, but also the fact that you have these all-star games, you just have it like that final process of putting it all together and why there can still be changes, a couple of months after the regular season for high school is over, kind of going into like that final ranking that's going to be the one that stands the test of time, I guess.
Yeah. So it's a quick turnaround from the end of the season to when we put this final ranking out. It's really about a month, I guess, that you have. And I think when you think about that in comparison to like the NFL draft isn't until April, like late April. So this like really 4+ months to sort things out. Our turnaround is a lot quicker. So we try to keep up with senior film as best we can during the season. But when you're talking about, we grade, 3,000, 4,000 players, it's really a lot to keep up with during the season. We try to we do keep a good tabs on it, but like it's really easiest for us to do. And I feel like you get the best picture once the dust is settled. You have everyone's stats, you have all of the film, and then we have these in-person evaluations at All-Star games. I think Cody and I, between us, we went to 5 different All-Star games, from, I guess, the early December to the middle of January. I actually went to the Poly Bowl in Hawaii this year. So we saw like a ton of players really from now both cycles, because a lot of the rising seniors, the 2027s were in a lot of these national all-star games. So the in-person evaluations, kind of this last in-person evals, we get a ton of those really right before we put the rankings out. So for us, and especially for like a lot of these big men, these linemen that you don't see on the 7-on-7 circuit, for us, a lot of times it's the best in-person eval, and sometimes the only in-person eval. It comes in the all-star setting, which are like padded practices. It's like real football, not even like really a camp. So those are great points of reference for us when you kind of get best on best. You have 300-pound offensive tackle blocking a 250-pound defensive end. So you really can get a decent picture of how these guys stack up, because they're all on the field, together with the best, like a lot of the best prospects in the country. So it's a really good, litmus test before we put it together. But for me, I know it might feel like to the fans like there's not a lot of football being played, but for us, like there's a lot of really substantial stuff that's going on the last like month or so of the season, and it takes a while to process everything and go through all the film in like an orderly fashion, kind of how we do it. We really rank by position. So we'll I'll, like for instance, like I'm working on corners for 2027 right now. I got like 120 corners I need to go through. So we do that. It's kind of a systematic way where you can actually compare the players within their position, stack the position, and then we put together the full Rivals 300 off of the position rankings. So we try to keep it. It's a big undertaking, but we feel like the best way we can do it and like maintain accuracy and quality control is to have like a kind of an orderly system.
Charles, good stuff. That's great insight for everybody out there. But let's kind of pivot or transition into pretty much what you were just talking about, right? Guys who were risers during their senior season because of what they did senior year, because of what they did all-star games, and more specifically linemen. And so one of the guys that you, Cody, had a chance to see in all-star season, during all-star season, was Julian Walker, who was a big riser in the rankings. And then he was one of those 250-pound plus guys out there going out in padded practices, doing some really good things. Wes, I'm going to throw up the film here, but let's dive into Julian a little bit and just what you saw from his progression and his growth and why he ended up making such a big jump.
Yeah, so Julian Walker, I was thinking back to when we first ranked him. It would have been in this, like the ranking I'm working on currently, a year ago. So it was our 2026 post-junior season overhaul. I don't think he was ranked by anybody else at the time. I think he had South Carolina and I think Michigan were his biggest offers. But a guy who was still like nationally like a relative unknown. And I think the second you turned on the film early, you could see he's got a lot of physical ability, right? Just big frame, good athlete. Obviously, he's playing really meaningful playoff football at Dutch Fork, and I feel like when you watch his junior season, he got consistently better and better, and that's kind of the story of just his development. He has really got shown impressive improvement, and we knew like within the first minute or so watching him, I was like, okay, this guy's got like a lot of physical upside, but he's continued to tap into that and has become like a very good player. And I think, seeing him at the Navy All-American Bowl go up against these top offensive linemen, he was really kind of bullying guys with his bull rush. He has a really nasty long arm move. So I think when you're kind of combining just the size, and he's 6'6", 245, he's got plus length, like over 34-inch arms. When you combine the size, the athleticism with kind of improving strength, like I think he's a guy who's going to continue to get bigger and stronger. He's really kind of just growing into his body right now. And then you look at the season he had, and he had a really good senior season. I think he had like 24 tackles for loss and 15 sacks. I mean, that's among the best kind of in that edge group, the top of the edge group. So when we were going through this ranking, we felt like just based on the upside, the improvement, the game film, seeing him in person in that all-star setting, he really checked a ton of boxes, and we felt like it is a strong edge group nationally in 2026. So we felt like he was certainly worthy of being a 5-star. And when we ultimately stacked that group, I think he ended up 16 for us. So kind of like right in the middle of that top 32 5-stars. So huge flip for South Carolina. get him, right before signing day. But he's always been a guy that we liked, and I think in doing this, I think you want to see prospects that continue to ascend and are really like playing their best and continue to improve once they get to college. Because you just want to bet on guys with upward trajectory from a developmental perspective. And I think Julian Walker kind of symbolizes that. And I wouldn't be shocked. I mean, I think he's going to need to continue getting bigger and stronger. And he will, I think, given his frame. But I wouldn't be shocked if he finds a way to work his way into the rotation just based off what we saw. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily expect like a freshman starter. Because edge is always a position that's very difficult to make impact early in college football. But I could see him being a guy who earns snaps as a true freshman based on what we saw.
Yeah, you're kind of reading my mind, Charles. I was about to ask. So obviously South Carolina's Dylan Stewart back. They bring in Caleb Herring from Tennessee. In theory, he's maybe your starter opposite of Dylan. There's a lot of snaps to potentially be had like that just next group. And there'll be some, some fighting for positioning there. But you think he potentially could be ready to kind of step into that, like, hey, you're going to be one of the first guys off the bench at that position type role, I guess?
Yeah, I could see him definitely competing for sure. Just based on what we've seen him. You don't really see a ton of guys with this size and frame and movement skills just at the high school level. So he's a guy who's gonna pass all of the getting off the bus tests. And I think just when you look at like the player, I mean I was impressed by his play strength, and I think he's gonna need to continue adding to like his pass rush repertoire, like just just with the coaching he's gonna get in college. I think he'll get that, but I with a lot of these guys, with all these freshmen, the summer's big, right? You want to get in there and put on good weight, get stronger. So I think he can do that just based on like, seeing him in person. I think he's got plenty of room to continue, tacking on size. And he's not a small guy. He's probably 250 right now, I would imagine. So, I think he definitely has a shot. And he kind of has the play style, because a lot of these freshman defensive ends, you put them in a college game, they're like liabilities as run defenders. I think if he gets a little stronger, I don't necessarily see him being a massive liability as a run defender, like a lot of freshman defensive ends are. So I could see it for sure. Especially once you like you said, Wes, once you get outside of Dylan Stewart, Caleb Herring. I mean, I know South Carolina likes to rotate a lot there, so and you want to keep like a guy like Dylan Stewart fresh to make plays in important impact situations. So I could definitely see Walker working his way in there.
Let's get into another late riser, man, and a guy that I don't think gets talked about as much as some of the other guys in that class. And that's Kashi Barnes, the DB, from a really good high school program there in Grimsley. And just I feel like I'm guessing when you guys looked at it, he probably had a really good senior season, because it seemed like he kind of just was on an upward trajectory in the latter part of his high school career. But what did you guys see from him? And will we look back at this as maybe being another one of those Torian Gray kind of early stills where he's able to come in and develop a guy like that?
Yeah, so I think Kashi Barnes, I think the selling point on him is he has a bunch of physical and athletic traits, right? He is a jumbo corner, like in the camp setting, he was, I think, 6'2", 195. I think he's over 200 now. I think South Carolina has on the roster maybe at like 206, I want to say. But like he's big, he's very athletic, tested really well in the camp setting. And he's a guy who is younger for the class. He's not going to turn 18 until like late August. So still, a lot of like physical upside there, which, corner is a position where traits really do matter. So I think he's got a ton of those. Very productive season at Grimsley. I think he had 4 picks. Played a little offense as well. I mean, Grimsley is probably at this point the best high school program in North Carolina. It's interesting. It's interesting seeing how he was used in high school. And he's a guy who I think if we had seen more film of him in actual like traditional corner coverage, he could have even been higher. He really kind of played as almost like a big nickel. At times, like rolling into the box, this year. So I think he's a guy who, when you look at it, I mean, I don't have a ton of questions about his cover ability, because you can kind of watch him in the camp setting and watch like junior film with that. But he was used in an interesting way where I think he offers like some positional versatility. He's a guy who's gonna, has the body of outside corner and like I guess the athleticism. You want to see like a prototypical outside corner athleticism, but could play in the nickel as well. Like he's a guy who's kind of moved all over the defense and is pretty comfortable. Just being a versatile piece. But Torian Gray definitely has a type at corner, and I think he fits that type to a T just with his size and athleticism. I think it's a really good skill set to kind of work with and mold, especially for like a guy who's younger and has a bunch more upside. I mean, I think he's just scratching the surface of his potential. And he's a guy who, we could look back in 3 years and say like he was ranked too low. Like he should have been higher just based off of his like, physical traits.
Yeah. I mean, he's one of those guys for me, Charles, that you see him on film and you're like, all right, you like what you see. He looks like a bigger kid on film. And then you see him in person. And if you rolled up Kashi Barnes to me and you said, this guy's a junior at South Carolina, I'd buy it easily. Like he's already very like physically advanced and filled out, kind of like a DB version of Julian Walker, right? Like how much do you think that helps out for, obviously corners, safeties, nickels, like they're not playing as close to the ball, so they're in theory ready to play quicker. But does that help a guy like him that he's already physically advanced, do you think, for year one?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think, like corner is a position where I don't think we talk about tackling ability enough, physicality enough. It's kind of like the conversation you have with the running back in like pass protection. A lot of young running backs can't get on the field because they can't pass protect on pass down. So I think that's kind of a hurdle for younger DBs, especially corners, with the way offenses play now. Like if they know a corner can't tackle, they're going to throw a quick screen to that guy like every time. They put them in a one-on-one situation and try to make them tackle in space. So I think that's an important factor. But yeah, I think he's going to be good there. He like certainly is not going to have any kind of physical limitation. I mean, he's a jumbo corner right now, and he's 17 years old. So I think it'll be interesting to see where his body goes. Like, is he going to be 220? Like, I'm not really sure, but I think the versatility he showed as a senior, I think gives him like multiple pathways to success with where you can play him, how he fits in the secondary. I think it increases the odds of him being like one of your 5 best DBs earlier in his career. So he's a guy who's really kind of an interesting prospect, and a guy who I studied a good bit for this final ranking, and was trying to find a good spot for him kind of in that corner group, because he's a little unique just with his skill set and size, and just kind of the role that he played in high school.
Charles, let's loop a couple of guys together. Zion Giles, Darius Gray. It was always interesting throughout the process. Like if you looked the Rivals ranking, Zion was the number 1 interior offensive lineman for a steady portion of that class. And then at times, Darius Gray, if you looked at like the industry ranking or some of the other rankings, was the number 1. South Carolina gets them both on campus. What are your thoughts on kind of both those guys and maybe strengths and weaknesses of each?
Yeah. So I think they're very different prospects in terms of just kind of their skill sets and, maybe where they're at, like just from a developmental perspective. And also too, I mean, Darius Gray was kind of more of a national prospect, a guy who was kind of out on the circuit. He was at the Navy All-American Bowl as a junior. So that probably, I think, might have affected just him being ranked higher earlier across the industry, whereas like Zion Giles is at Carver's Bay, didn't really go to any national events, saw him at the Shrine Bowl. But yeah, so like starting with Zion Giles, I think, I mean, big body, super like just a fluid athlete, a guy who he really has like the movement skills you want to see on like, just on the offensive line. I think he has some positional versatility, probably like him long-term. Like I think NFL wise, he's more than likely a guard. His arm length, I think, for NFL offensive tackle is probably not quite there. But big body. I mean, you can see one thing I love about Zion Giles is just the play personality, like nasty disposition. I would like watch some of his games. You click through and it's the 4th quarter and he's like pushing guys to the sideline, like in, the game's like out of hand. So I really like the competitiveness, which is something I think is probably not talked about enough with offensive linemen. But yeah, physical, just kind of a dominant high school offensive lineman at Carver's Bay. And then, saw him at the Shrine Bowl. I thought, look like arguably the top prospect there. You can maybe, go back and forth between him and like a guy like Javian Currents, but passes the eye test. I mean, he's, I think, a lot closer ready, like in terms of being ready to go physically than people would think. But I think he's going to probably need to work on his technique. It's going to be a jump from in terms of the competition level. Especially, it'll be interesting to see kind of where he starts positionally. I think he would need more work as a tackle, just because that's an adjustment in terms of pass pro, going from, what was Carver's Bay, like 2A to the SEC. But yeah, I think Zion Giles might need a year or so to kind of marinate in the program, but a bunch of upside. I think he is high end upside. And I want to say he finished as our number one interior offensive lineman in this cycle. I know he was sitting at number one for a long time, for most of the cycle for us. And he's a guy too, I probably have just had a little more exposure to than a lot of the other national, ranking folks. But Darius Gray is really good interior offensive line prospect. Great athlete. I mean, this is a guy who's like a phenomenal high school basketball player. I don't know what his averages were. I think it was like maybe like 20, like he averaged like double and over 20 points a game. And really moves well. He is not the tallest or biggest guy. He's probably like under 6'3". I would say he's like probably an official like NFL combine, like 6'2.5". So I think that might maybe put him more of a guy who like long-term might project as like a center, could play guard. I think he's going to need to continue getting a little bigger, but you can see here, I mean, two-way player, really kind of does everything you want to see from an offensive line prospect, just with his ability to like, he's just like a really well-rounded football player, like impact player on both sides of the ball, plus athlete. He's long, he's nasty, finishes blocks, and just kind of has the athletic profile that points to like a really good upside. He was good in person when we saw him at the Navy All-American Bowl. Probably plays a little bigger than his size, but I think that's kind of, like a guy like Zion Giles is gonna probably look better walking through the door, just a little more physically imposing. But Darius Gray has a lot of positives too, and I think he's, he's a big get for South Carolina. Has a lot of positional versatility. I think at the college level, ultimately, I do think he's probably an interior guy, maybe a center in the NFL would be his best position, but certainly could see him playing tackle in college. And he has like compensatory length. He's got like 33.5-inch arms. So you wouldn't feel like really bad throwing him out on the edge. I mean, probably reminds me a little bit. I don't know if y'all remember like Isaiah Wynn at Georgia.
Yeah.
Reminds me of like, if he plays tackle, I could see him maybe being a guy kind of like that. But I think he and Zion Giles are both guys with some versatility, and I'm interested to see where they go. Start out on the offensive line, and with South Carolina signing so much experience in the portal, I think that is probably going to benefit these guys, because I think the Gamecocks have been in positions where they've had to play young offensive linemen earlier than they were probably ready. So I think it's going to be if these guys get on the field, it's going to be by their own merit, not out of a necessity situation. So, but yeah, I think those are two guys that are definitely worth being excited about on the offensive line.
Charles, quick, kind of eval question on offensive linemen. So Darius, I taught his high school coach when I went and covered his commitment, and he mentioned a couple interesting things. One is he said, this is the only kid I've ever coached where I feel like he could have gone Division I, Power 4, and played defensive tackle if he wanted to. Of course, he projects as an offensive lineman, but he also just talked about his leadership and his IQ. So when you're evaluating offensive linemen as much as you can, right? It's not like you can get to know on a personal level all these guys, but how much do you bake that in, especially for someone who you project as like Darius Gray, like, hey, I think this kid may be a center. Well, there's kind of a second level of needing to be cerebral and being able to be a leader and all those. How much do you bake that into the eval process?
Yeah, it's something where, it's going to be uneven for every kid. So it's difficult to, we try not to play like psychologists. I think if you can get like verifiable information from people we trust, I think that matters. Some of it is, we hopefully get to see a lot of these players in person over the course of the 2+ years that we rank them. So I think that matters. I think there's things that I can try to discern on film just with like the play personality and just general awareness. I mean, you can pick up some things watching game film that you definitely can't get from a highlight. Like, is he jumping off sides a bunch? Is he getting, unnecessary penalties, things like that. But I think that's always a positive. And that's a piece that maybe colleges, when they have so much access to the players that maybe we don't have, and we're doing a different task than a lot of the colleges where they're team building. Typical college programs board might be a couple hundred guys. We're ranking like 3,500, so it's a little different, the depth that they can go. But whenever we drill down to the top guys, like stuff like that does matter. And I think when we go back and look at our rankings over time, a lot of the guys who end up hitting, especially when you're dealing with like the elite prospects, are guys who are smart, like they're very low, like there's not a lot of volatility with them as players, like they're durable, they don't get hurt a ton. Like, so those are all things that do matter. But it's kind of just, it's all like one picture. It's not something that like we're gonna like necessarily, slide our rankings around a ton. But I will say too, not to change subjects, but like I wasn't sure, Wes, if you were going to ask about Javian Currents, but I think he's a guy who is very similar to Darius Gray in that respect. And that's like, this is a good example, I guess, to kind of how our exposure to these players. So like whenever I went out to Shrine Bowl practices, I was like really impressed by how Javian Currents practiced. And just like, I thought like just in that setting, like the intangibles were like as good as they could have looked in those couple practices I went to. I mean, he was basically running the practice. Like I thought just like the effort he showed. I mean, because Shrine Bowl practices, like they can be a little lackadaisical. I mean, if we're not, so, but I mean, he was like intense. He was like making guys do push-ups after they were dropping the ball. It was like a very pleasant surprise and something you don't always see at those practices. So, and I think when you carry that over to just watching him play as a senior, just like the competitiveness kind of just like jumps off the video. So that's, I guess, a good example of, our exposure to these prospects and things you can maybe discern and go back to the film and say, like, does this kind of back things up? But he was super impressive in that setting. And it kind of like reminded me, like, I think back in the day, I think the most intense, high energy player I've ever seen at All-Star practice was probably Jamal Adams, maybe like about 10+ years ago. And it kind of reminded me of that. So, but I think he's a guy who like has the look of like a defensive captain at South Carolina, just based on, my exposure to him, in that setting.
Yeah. And to your point, man, Shrine Bowl practice, like you can get down. I mean, you can basically be on the field. So you're hearing and seeing everything. I liked Charles. He made guys do push-ups, but he did the push-ups with them. Yeah. So he was like right there in it. He was running drills, throwing passes to DBs. Like it was kind of cool to see. And the Shrine Bowl guys opt out of that thing these days. So seeing him just decide, I'm not just going to go, I'm going to go compete. He's another one that's, man, he's been on the radar for, I feel like I heard about this dude when he was in 8th grade or something.
Yeah.
I think he was like a corner back then, maybe even. Mm-hmm. But what do you kind of see on the film? And he, I feel like he's a guy who maybe transitions to college ball fairly quickly, just in terms of his mindset.
Yeah. And Javian Currents, like you said, he's a guy that we've known about for a long time, right? I mean, he's been one of the top prospects in the state in this class for a long time. I think he played by far his best football as a senior, and that has to be like so encouraging. We saw him at the Navy All-American Bowl a year ago. He was there with Darius Gray. I think he was really impressive in that setting. Physical in practices, made a bunch of plays. But I always kind of I thought the junior film like left me wanting to see a little more in terms of just the safety position in this cycle is pretty deep. I also, he's a guy who I think plays faster than he tests, like ran in the 4.8s at camp. So that was always something I kind of was like a little bit of a question. And then, you turn on his senior film And man, like I don't know if he should have won all of the awards in South Carolina in terms of like Mr. Football, Gatorade Player of the Year. And he was the best high school player in South Carolina this year. I think he had like maybe like 4,000 total yards. I mean, South Point was dominant. The play as a quarterback was exceptional. I think he ran for like 1,600 plus yards. Really, like I thought the burst was phenomenal. At least like a really, really nice surprise. So I don't really have a ton of questions about his play speed after watching the film as a senior. But like physical, instinctive, just a great high school player, which is, I think when you're ranking safeties, most top safeties, especially if they're guys who play both ways, are generally the best player in high school because they're kind of like, that's kind of what safety involves. It involves ball skills, instincts, physicality. And he had all of that. And then, going back and I like watched their playoff run, and he was playing quarterback and he basically was rotating in every other series on defense. So I think he's a guy who, if he had played full games just at safety, I mean, he had good stats on defense, but they would have been even better. I mean, he like had like his 4 or 5 picks or whatever it came to the total, basically playing half the snaps on defense. So just an impact player. Again, big defensive back. Torian Gray obviously loves the size, and I think he'll be a guy who will definitely. I think he's set up to make an early impact just based on his football IQ and just the size. He's around like 6'4", 210. I mean, he's a big guy. So it's probably unfair to compare him to like a guy like Nicky Manwari just from an athleticism perspective. I mean, Nicky Manwari is a top like 0.01% athlete at safety. But I think you're talking about like that kind of size. So a little different player, but I think has a chance to like, make a quite a large impact in his time. And I think he could be an early impact. We wrote a story around the second signing day, just for like early impact freshman. And he was like one of the guys that I picked, at DB.
Charles, let's go to a guy that, if I'm not mistaken, you're maybe not quite. He's one of those outliers in that maybe you're not quite as high on him, not that you're low on him, than some of the other services. And this is by request too. One of our listeners wants you to talk about SQ Patterson a little bit. I'll throw up some of his film. Another at least 2 sport guy, had a good year in basketball, played both ways at Indian Land, had a really nice senior year. What do you see from him? What are the things you like? What are any concerns that you may have when you look at him?
Yeah. So, SQ Patterson is a guy who I've actually got to see a pretty good bit. Whether that was, the camp setting 7-on-7 circuit, got to see him at Shrine Bowl practices. And I think he was at the All-American Bowl this year as well. So I've seen him at a ton, especially for a guy who reclassified. So he was initially in the 2027 cycle, reclassified to 26. I think initially was on the radar kind of as an athlete, a two-way guy, looks more and more like a receiver now. I think from a skill set perspective, I would kind of classify him as like a possession slot receiver. I think he's, got quality hands. He's probably most effective at working like the, short intermediate areas of the field. Probably gonna need to continue just improving his like long speed. He's a guy who's like more athletic in the sense of like kind of like the vertical explosiveness than maybe like the long speed. So I think that would help him. That's, I think, one of the bigger questions. But, he's an instinctive player, productive. Receiver is a position where there are so many receivers. I think we ranked like 400 plus guys this year. So it's like it's most receivers who are like even like in that kind of mid 3-star range are all like very good, kind of in a vacuum. But I think for us, I just would want to see in terms of like his ranking. I think just like the play speed and just the ability to kind of be like more of a big play threat at his size. But I think he's a guy who, when you're looking at like building a receiver room, like you need guys like this. You need guys who can work underneath, who have some spatial awareness and can pick up tough yards and do dirty work. And I think he could be that guy. But and I think the reclassification, that's always an adjustment as well. I mean, just generally speaking, from my time doing this, I did a study on reclassifications last off season, and it is like pretty difficult for guys, to make impacts, especially early impacts after reclassifying. So it's something where I think, just from a fan perspective, you're kind of best served to not have a ton of early expectations for players who reclassify. I mean, I guess South Carolina fans are probably a little familiar with that when you had Donovan Murph and Jordan Gidron reclassify. I mean, Murph made a little bit of impact last year, but I think anything you get with those guys early on is probably should be kind of viewed more as like a bonus than an expectation.
Charles, we got to talk quarterback, man. Landon Duckworth. I don't know how you rank a guy like this, man. Like I feel like with Landon, there's so much just oozing athleticism here.
Yeah.
I actually read your piece on basketball backgrounds with quarterbacks. Very fascinating. If you're listening or watching, go check it out on On3/Rivals. But man, Landon, you and I talked about this a little bit at the Shrine Bowl. Like, if he's like amazing in college, you're really not surprised at all. But then there's also, I think, got to be kind of a big jump in some areas as well, just to my eyes. So how, what are your thoughts on Landon? How do you even kind of go about sorting through these QBs, man?
Yeah, I mean, Landon Duckworth he has a very high ceiling in terms of his physical ability. It's super athlete. I mean, he is a 3-sport like state champion type of athlete. And I mean, strong arm, can really run. Like you said, Wes, really good basketball player. I mean, his dunk reel is probably one of the best ones you'll see in the cycle out of like for any position. I mean, he's like windmill dunking. So he's got all of the physical tools you look for. And, Cody saw him in person. We saw him in person several times over the course of the cycle, but saw him recently at the Alabama-Mississippi All-Star game, like back in December, and came away. He was like, man, he can really like spin it. Like the ball jumps off his hand. And so I think there's a ton to work with there. And I like the fit with him in Kendall Briles' offense. I think, when you look at what Briles can do in terms of simplifying things for young quarterbacks and just really putting them in positions to let their physical tools shine through. I like that fit a lot. I think the biggest thing with Duckworth, and I've clicked through his games and seen the good and the bad. He's a guy who is at times in high school film chaotic, and like in the good way and the bad way. And there's a lot of like, oh no yes moments when you're watching him play. So I think he's gonna need to like rein in some of that, certainly at the college level, and just continue honing his consistency. He played like his high school was like, I mean, one of the more talented programs, I think probably in the Southeast, if you're looking at just prospects at multiple positions. His running back was Xavier Crowell, who's the number 2 running back in the country, signed with Alabama, the guy who, South Carolina SEC fans are going to know about probably starting next year. It was thrown to a bunch of like talented receivers. They kind of just would stomp teams a lot generally, but but like Duckworth, ton of physical potential. I think he's, in a good situation at South Carolina where he's not going to be expected to play early. You kind of get him in there for a year and kind of see, and, it depends on how things shake out. But, I could see him having a competition with Cutter Woods. I mean, who knows if South Carolina's going to go to the portal after Lenore Sellers leaves again to supplement that room. But I think between he and Cutter Woods, I think they both complement each other well. They have like, strengths and weaknesses, but, I think the name of the game today in college football is you got to have a guy at quarterback. And there's a chance that Duckworth is a guy, after a couple of years. So those are the kind of dice rolls you want to see your team taking, in my opinion, at the quarterback, in terms of like recruiting guys out of high school.
And Charles, when you're ranking quarterbacks, I mean, to kind of go back to Wes's question, to expand on that more, like ranking quarterbacks, I mean, to me seems probably one of the tougher things to do. And so when you're ranking a guy like Duckworth where he is, how much of it is, okay, if he reaches his potential, this is where he's at versus, what he is right now. You know what I mean? Like, it seems like that's a hard line to walk.
It is. I think you kind of, it's difficult, and you have guys who, to varying degrees, are like really good high school players and may have limited physical upside. You have guys with, a ton of upside, but they need refinement. So I think for us, and it's a little bit of a moving target depending on what time you're at in the cycle. But generally, I think you want to see continued progression just with like for the player in terms of adding polish, the production, the later on in the career. But it is quarterbacks come in all shapes and sizes. So ultimately these kind of are like NFL draft projections. So we do, I probably lean upside a little more than just pure production, but ideally with the top guys, you want to have both. So, some years we don't have a ton of top quarterbacks that are really high in traits and super productive. And that's part of why I like Lenore Seller so much. I mean, he like kind of had all of those. So, but the senior year for us is really instructive with that. And you kind of drill down and watch game film and try to get a good idea for, the player and just kind of what they can do, in the context of their high school offense. And then we actually don't see as many of these quarterbacks in all-star settings. A lot of these guys enroll early now. So for us, a lot of times the last in-person eval for this group is like Elite 11 finals, which is, I think over the years, I kind of view that more of like a way to compare their physical tools and just kind of where they're at. But not necessarily it's like certainly not like a make or break type of deal. You just kind of, historically, most of the top quarterbacks at the Elite 11 are just like pretty good. Maybe not like amazing or well below average of that group. So yeah, it's quarterbacks. I mean, I think if someone could come up with a way to really streamline that, they would, make a lot of money on a business or something like that. But it's tough. And I think these schools are figuring it out too. I mean, it's a challenge for these schools. When you look at how early the quarterback recruiting is now, I think there's a strong argument to be made. The earlier you take a quarterback, like in terms of like a high school prospect, the less chance they have of being a starter at your school. Because it's just tough. Like, I mean, the best evaluators in college football struggle to evaluate quarterbacks when they're in 10th grade. It's just very, very difficult. You look at like the track record of like a guy like Lincoln Riley, right? He probably has the most top drafted quarterbacks of any coach in college football. His success is either most of his success at the quarterback position has been guys that he's taken pretty late in the recruiting process, like right before their senior year, or transfers. Because it is difficult to pin these guys down when they're in 10th grade, because it is like a developmental position. And it's like a performance position where you get better and better the more reps you get. So that's why for us, like the senior year and kind of seeing these guys late is such a big thing for us, like in terms of the eval and the ranking process.
Well, and then guys, they maybe get to a school and they don't play right away, and then they transfer. So you've spent 2 years recruiting a guy, and then he never even sees the field for you, and then he gets older, more mature, and goes and is all conference somewhere else. So there's a lot of variables in all this. Hey Charles, let's maybe loop two guys in state together. Maybe some similarities, I think, just physically. Caden Ramsey and Tristan Lewis, we saw both these guys at the Shrine Bowl as well. And you're looking at Currents. You expect Currents to look fantastic physically. And then I walk up on these two kids and I'm like, okay, they look the part as well, man. What do you maybe see from these two? I know they'll be playing different positions at South Carolina.
Yeah. I mean, they both, like you said, they both certainly passed the eye test. I think that was like one of my general takeaways from the Shrine Bowl is like all these South Carolina commits, I guess at the time signees, they look like SEC prospects physically. Like they're all like really good, like from a size perspective. Starting off with Caden Ramsey, small school guy at Cross, kind of does everything, like does what you want to see from a small school prospect, right? He's really impactful two-way player. I don't know what his interception total was in high school, but it's a ton. I think he had maybe like 20 picks like the last 2 years or something, or close to that. Plays like as a big center field safety, and then a receiver. Really like his basketball stuff too. I mean, he is like an above the rim explosive dunker. So I think that's all really encouraging. He's just kind of a big jumbo athlete. I think he'll continue getting bigger. Like once he gets in the strength program and he's focusing on football, lifting, eating year round. I think he's going to put on good weight. So just a versatile kind of piece on offense. But I wouldn't rule out maybe he plays defense. Like who knows? But I think I kind of view him as just like, I think we ranked him as a tight end because that's probably where he projects ultimately. But I kind of just a jumbo athlete, a guy who just, we see guys like this every year come out of the state of South Carolina. kind of small school guys with a lot of physical potential, multi-sport athletes, and they end up becoming a draft pick in 4 years. Might take them a couple years, but so I could see that as an outcome for Caden Ramsey for sure. And Tristan Lewis is another one who really interesting prospect. I think he was a camp eval for South Carolina, right? So I think that's a guy who we could look at and maybe say he wasn't ranked high enough in hindsight, just based off of South Carolina getting to work him through DB drills. Not a ton, high school quarterback, so not a ton there for us to go through in terms of what he does at or how he, I guess, his skill set at DB. But big kid, really like good athlete. Watching him move around, I thought he impressed at the Shrine Bowl practices. So I think he's one who, given the kind of synergy you see with high school quarterbacks converting to safety, I think if you're a college program, you kind of always like to have quarterbacks and safety. I mean, South Carolina, I guess, had success with that with DQ Smith, right? So I could see Tristan Lewis kind of making a similar type of transition to safety, but just for us, I wish that we had more like substantive stuff to go on just in terms of evaluating him as a safety. I mean, South Carolina's exposure to him as a safety is much, more extensive than ours. So I was kind of going off of like athletic projection, trying to watch plays of him kind of running around at quarterback. But and I thought just in the limited bit we saw him at the Shrine Bowl, I thought that was encouraging as well. So I could see him being a guy who, outplays his ranking based off of kind of the ambiguity with him projecting him as a safety.
Yeah, you actually nailed, by the way, Caden Ramsey, 20 picks over the past 2 years, 13 as a junior. I don't know if I've heard of a 6'5" tight end projection having 13 picks as a junior. You don't really, see that a lot. But so speaking of big guys, let's go here next, Charles. Noah Clark out of North Carolina is a guy that I think is pretty intriguing because if you see him, he's massive. This is a 6'4" plus, 350 pound guy. And one of the early returns, he's already on campus at South Carolina, that we have heard is that, this is a guy that to be that big does have some twitch to him. So what do you see from him? Because I feel like he's kind of a unique guy in this class.
We want to loop the Harris twins into this too, maybe just
Aiden and Andrew.
Yeah, all of the North Carolina defensive front guys.
Yes.
I mean, Noah Clark, big body. I think guys like him are at a premium in the SEC. Like, you talk about like how expensive it is to get interior defensive linemen out of the portal. Like, you want to have like guys like that. So I mean, big athlete. I think he's maybe 6'5", 340. He's a guy who, another one who I think you could certainly make an argument for him as a 4-star, right? Didn't end up there for us, but and I think once he probably has some things to continue shoring up in terms of just like the consistency, but I think has a high upside, and getting him in there and working with Travian Robertson and getting him in the strength program, I think would not be surprised if he's a guy who makes an impact in a year or two. And I mean, you just don't see a lot of guys that big. Like, and that's especially in the SEC. That is a premium value type of position in terms of, when you go up against the Georgias of the world, you need guys with that kind of size to hold up on the interior. With the Harris twins, I mean, they're both phenomenal high school football players. Weddington, I think, had one of the best defenses in North Carolina, maybe in the Carolinas, the Southeast. And Aiden Harris is just, in terms of being a high school player, is one of the best high school players in this cycle, on the defensive front. I got to see him at the All-American Bowl. He's put on size. I mean, I think he was a guy who we kind of always viewed maybe he's a little bit of a tweener, a guy who could maybe play edge early on in his career. He's going to need to put on weight to play on the interior. I mean, he's over 280 now. So, I think at the minimum, you're talking about early on in his career, I mean, he might be like a Tonka Hemingway type of size role. And I think he's going to continue getting bigger to grow into that. But I mean, he's a great player, super technical. He was really good when we saw him in person. He's always been good on film. I think he's a guy who probably isn't getting talked about enough, because I mean, he's going to come in his level of polish is going to be ready to make impact. The biggest question was just how was the size going to hold up early? And his brother Andrew, versatile guy, can rush the passer. I think he has the athleticism to play linebacker as well. When you think back to maybe how, assuming he sticks at linebacker, you think about how the linebackers for South Carolina were used like 2 years ago, like like guys like Demetrius Knight, how they could rush those guys. I could see Andrew Harris being used in that role. But I know Clayton White seems to like big linebackers, so I think his size is going to translate a little better to linebacker. But he could be a demon, in pass rush downs as an edge as well. It's really high. Both the Harris twins are really high effort players. Like they play with their hair on fire. They've been coached well at Weddington, and they're always like really fun to watch. I mean, I would watch prospects play against Weddington. Like I would watch like they played Faison Brandon, the quarterback who signed with Tennessee in the playoffs this year, and you kind of watch it and you're like, man, these guys are in. Like you better pack a lunch when you're going to play these guys, because they're coming after you for 4 quarters, and it is teams did not score a lot of points on them. So they were always fun to watch, as a duo.
Charles, we'll save some of the 2027 talk maybe for the most part for later, but I know you said you're working on corners right now. So talk to us about Josh Dobson a little bit if you can.
Yeah.
Was an in-state target. I guess he's over the border now in North Carolina, but certainly one of my favorite prospects in the last few years in the state of South Carolina in terms of just kind of checking a lot of those boxes like we talk about.
Yeah. Super athlete, like phenomenal athlete. I mean, this is a guy who ran like a laser 4.39 last year, on the camp circuit, at the Under Armour camp, runs in the 10.7s and the 100 meters, I believe. And, I think the thing that I like about him is he's got the athleticism. He's got good size. He's like 6'1", 185, quality ball skills. But when you look, like, I think he has really good feet as a corner. He's not a guy who's just a straight line athlete. Can really change directions. He can stay with receivers, kind of mirroring routes, quick change of direction within the route. So I think the athleticism it is functional and projects really well to covering. Got to see him, in the camp setting. Saw him at Under Armour game. So he's an early 5-star for us. We don't give out a ton of 5-star grades early. So for us to make a guy a 5-star that early in the process kind of says, speaks a lot about what we think of him. And I think he's a guy who, it makes sense why he's so coveted. And the athleticism is like through the roof. So he's a guy who I think, it's going to be fun to watch him at Huff. He'll play, really a competition, and you're kind of looking forward to seeing, tracking him over the next year or so. But, certainly a guy who, it definitely makes sense why he's like a top target for a lot of these teams.
Yeah, he'll be working with Chachi, who has worked with a ton of defensive backs there. I think that'll be good for him as well. I think he probably already trains with him, but I think it'll be a good situation for him. Charles, before we let you get out of here, man, what do you think is the fit for Lenoris with Kendall Briles? I know we talked about Landon and Briles, and you're as familiar with Lenoris probably as anybody going back to his high school career. What do you think are maybe some things of his game that can be unlocked by Briles?
Yeah, I mean, I think Kendall Briles has shown that he is willing to, he built his offense around the skill set of his players, but I think it's important putting them in positions to like that where they're comfortable. And I think whenever, if you watched Lenore Sellers last year, just the offense in general, it was just disjointed. Not like there was, I think a lot of that kind of fell on the offensive line, and I think at times Sellers probably played better than it would like appear if you kind of would like go back and watch the film and kind of see the situations he put in. He made a lot of positives out of like really negative situations. I think a lot of quarterbacks you would put back there, like it would look worse. But I think Briles is creative, and I think he'll find ways to, just simplify the offense for everyone involved, get the ball to playmakers. And I think he's shown the ability to kind of maximize what they have there. And I think Sellers is probably in the top 2 or 3 maybe arguably the most physically talented quarterback in college football. So I think it should be fun to watch. And I think you look at what South Carolina is bringing back, at receiver, the work they did in the offensive line. I mean, Jacarius Peak, I think, is arguably one of the biggest gets in the transfer portal period nationally. When you think about what South Carolina needs at offensive line, the type of player he is. I mean, he was a guy who's we had a pretty very highly ranked out of high school. I think he was in the top 150s, top 200. Didn't have a ton of offers either, but he was a guy who kind of blew up his senior year. Freak athlete. If you want to have fun, go back and watch Jacarius Peak's senior film in high school. But Clark Brooks, who does the portal rankings for us at On3, thinks he's one of the best tackles in college football. So I think when you talk about the situation for Sellers, I think is going to be a lot more favorable this year based on the context with Kendall Briles, what they brought in the portal, guys coming back. I think adding Nitro Tuggle is a really good compliment for Nick Harbor. Nick Harbor came along. I think he's kind of become the player that we thought he was going to be. He's a guy who can, almost, I think we said he's 6'5" Demir Bird, right? He's a guy who can take the top off on anybody. And I think he's made a really good improvement as a receiver. But I think adding a guy like Nitro Tuggle who can kind of win in a conventional way, the emergence of Jaden Sellers, the guys they brought in at running back. I think there is definitely a bullish case to South Carolina when you look at the pieces they've added going into this year. And, I think if it all comes together, Sellers, I think everybody knows the type of potential he has. And I think, best case scenario, you see South Carolina having a really good year on offense and Sellers being a top draft pick.
And some good early returns here on Peak, just in terms of kind of leadership and kind of taking control of the room early on as well. So I think all those things are great signs for them. Charles, man, awesome stuff as always. I know you got a lot going on, so we appreciate you, going in depth with us on this stuff. I know that it's always one of our favorite shows we do, and I think our viewers and listeners will agree with that as well, man. So we'll let you get back to ranking the number 129th cornerback in the 2027 class. But, man, we really do truly appreciate it, okay?
Yeah, sounds good. Enjoy coming on with y'all, and we'll do it again.
Yeah, we'll maybe this summer we'll kind of catch up on everything with the 2027 guys. So if not, I guess I'll see you in a coffee shop outside the Shrine Bowl like I did this past year. Yeah. So all right, here's Charles Power. Go follow him on Twitter /X at Charles Power. We'll let Charles get out of here. But Chris, phenomenal stuff as always, man. We covered a ton of ground.
Ooh, there's a lot in there.
If you just want the surface level of what's going on with these guys, this is not the episode for you. If you want the detail on why they were ranked, how they were ranked, the positives and the little question marks too, then if you're joining us late, you didn't catch the brunt of the show, go back and listen if you really just want the true detail from Charles.
Yeah, that's why I love talking to Charles, because I feel like we learn something every time about how he's ranking players. It's unbelievable. I think there's kind of this general perception, Wes, that they just go up and down and they look at who's offered and see how big they are and look at their stats. And Charles is diving in, you can tell. He even dropped that nugget, which I think I knew, but you're not just going through highlight tapes. They're getting full games, clicking through. They're trying to find the good and the bad. They're looking at track times. What other sports do they play? Seeing him at camps, there's a ton. God bless him for doing what he does, because he's great at it and being willing to do it and love doing it. Him and Cody Belair, Clark Brooks on the transfer portal side of things. It's awesome because it gives you great insight into these guys. Even, you may say, I don't agree with that. I think SQ Patterson should be ranked wherever, or this guy's too high or this guy's too low. There's always data to back up what he's saying. So really good stuff, really insightful stuff on a bunch of members of the class there.
Phrase of the day. Is it play personality? Is that what he said?
Play personality. Yes.
Giles, that will be our scouting term of the day for this episode. But maybe
the year.
Go watch Zion's film. This guy,
he does have some personality.
He's going. I always look for who on this field looks like Michael Orr in The Blind Side, like just wanting to block somebody into the stands. Basically, that's what Zion Giles was in high school. So something to
100%.
look forward to there for South Carolina fans. And Charles kind of bullish on Gamecocks offense, so we'll keep an eye on that moving forward too. All right, we're out of time here. That's right at an hour. Shout out again to Charles for hopping on, and shout out to all of you for listening and watching. And as always, shout out to our great sponsors here on the show, Ferry Chevrolet and Clint Hammond of CMG Home Loans, NMLS 71597, phone number 803-422-6797. He is Chris. I am Wes. By the way, a second episode of GC Live is coming up at 2:30. That will be a baseball preview edition of opening weekend with our guy, Jack Veltri. So if you are starving for more content, if you want to turn the page a bit to the baseball side of things, be on the lookout for that. It'll probably already be on the podcast feed if you're listening to this kind of later on. But if you're watching us live right now on YouTube, that's coming up at 2:30 here as we recorded on Thursday afternoon. So, all right, y'all, we will see you on the Gamecock Central forums. He is Chris. I'm Wes. We'll talk.